Well, I wish I could say today is the day we begin the course. Just about. This is our last day of context, right? So, starting tomorrow, we're going to bring the Mongols into the equation and watch them absolutely blow up the world, right? But if we're going to have the Mongols destroy the world, then we kind of have to know exactly what that world looks like prior to them. So we're going to use this map as our way of providing some context. It's just weird starting a world history course in the middle, but I get it. Anyway, so here is the Earth. If you're not acquainted, you should look it up sometime. You should go there. It's great. Well, if you look at the planet, say in 1200, right before the Mongols do their thing, let's start with the anchor, in my mind, the anchor of it all, China. So China is the bee's knees, the cat's meow, the cow's udder, the horse's mane. I mean, China is probably the best civilization that's ever been. On whole, now they have bad times, and other civilizations might eclipse them at other times. But I mean, on the whole, China is consistently probably the best, most impressive civilization. Going into 1200, that's probably fairly accurate here. So, China is huge size wise. China is populated, just like they are now. China is organized. Centralized is the word I'm using. The word centralized just means that they have a government, and that government has good control and can harness a lot of people to do a lot of things. China's amazing. They are probably the most inventive civilization of all time. Not that they invented everything, don't get me wrong, but I mean, we can make a long list of things they've invented. Um, Gunpowder. I mean, if they did nothing else but gunpowder, that's kind of a big deal, right? These guys, start with fireworks and rockets and eventually, of course, work their way up to weapons with that. They invent the compass. How humongous is that? I mean, Christopher Columbus is going to go on a journey with a compass. Why? Because the Chinese invented it and he got it from them, indirectly, mind you. They invented paper, the printing press. Now I know it was Johann Gutenberg. Yeah, I get that. Gutenberg invented movable type. The Chinese printing press was like a block that you carved your whole page into, but then you could make multiple copies quickly once you did that. I mean, the Chinese are just brilliant. Here's a picture of their early fire lance. Now they didn't put a projectile inside, so they had bamboo and gunpowder, and then it would go boom, and fire and stuff would spit out, but there was no bullet, so to speak. But still, no one else was doing it. The compass, this is movable type, to be fair, but the printing press, paper money, I didn't even mention that. They were the first country to try, hey, what if we just didn't use coins? And check this out, I think it's so cool. It was paper money that had pictures, oops, there we go, of the actual coins on it that it represented. Well, obviously, paper money's tough because it's not worth anything on its own, and if it's counterfeited or if people print too much of it, you get issues. But the Chinese are the ones that pioneered the idea of paper money. Bottom line is, the Chinese have what everybody wants: the technology. They knew how to make silk in a way that no one else could. They made the best porcelain on the planet. I mean, we've had clay pottery on Earth for thousands of years, but this stuff is delicate and dainty and refined and beautiful with brilliant colored glazes, and everybody wants it. Why else do they call it China, right? The Chinese invent all of this stuff. And everybody wants it. Now, the good news is there's this whole network called the Silk Roads. Not just silk is being transported on there. I mean, porcelain is on those Silk Roads. Chinese paper money, people want it around the world, is on the Silk Roads. Spices, whatever is out there, if it's worth anything, it's traveling these Silk Roads. Merchants are just going back and forth, making deals. So that Chinese stuff is out there. Now, right next door to China, we've got India. We've, of course, broached these societies with religion earlier. India is a unique animal. It is not centralized. And again, what we mean by that is there's no real strong government that runs all of India. In fact, the idea of India isn't even really a thing. It's a bunch of different places, a hodgepodge, if you will, which I will pathetically illustrate with these little splotches of beige. So, no strong government, no complicated system of running things like the Chinese have. But don't let that fool you, friends. The Indians are loaded. They are rich. it is a tropical environment. So you've got pepper, as in like salt and pepper, that kind of pepper that they have. They grow cinnamon there. They domesticate cotton. And all of this makes them pretty darn rich. It's a pretty rich place on the planet. Not to mention, of course, that India juts down into the Indian Ocean. So they're all pretty easily accessible to world trade. I mean, they invent cotton. Think about that. They learn how to domesticate the plant. They learn how to make this wonderful fabric. They learn how to dye it and make it with cool patterns. Everybody wants Indian cotton. Everybody wants Indian pepper. This is peppercorn, you know what I mean? Like your salt and pepper shaker, right? So it starts off being a berry, right? And then they dry the berry out, and then you grind it up, and voila, a peppery, delicious treat. Cinnamon, what a delicious spice. All of these things are Indians. And it makes it to the Silk Road. Just like, you've got Chinese merchants, you've got Indian merchants. And so can you get porcelain from China and India? Yeah, because they bought it from the Chinese. Can you get, I don't care, cotton fabric in China? Yes, you can, because they bought it from the Indians. They are all interconnected here. Now, if we keep traveling the Silk Roads, we get to the end of them, to the Byzantine Empire, which we mentioned briefly before. Remember, the Byzantines are the leftovers of what was once the mighty proud Roman Empire that stretched all the way around the Mediterranean Sea. We did allude to the fact that, barbarians have come in and destroyed the Western Roman Empire. But a little bit of Rome remains. These guys didn't call themselves Byzantines. They called themselves Romans. Think about that. We have a Roman Empire in the year 1200. Interesting. But anyway, I digress. So the Byzantine Empire is not going to be around much longer. That's the downside. They are kind of stuck in the middle. They're getting gobbled up from both sides. We didn't talk about the Crusades in here, and I guess we don't really need to, but Western Europe is kind of gobbling them up from one side. And the relatively new Islamic world, which is in its heyday here, is expanding and gobbling them up from the other. So we don't really need to say much about the Byzantines, except to know that their finest days are definitely behind them. And they are getting obliterated bit by bit. Oops, don't do that. What's that? Sorry. All right, the Islamic world. We spent a few days on Islam. These guys matter. The Chinese, probably number one. But Islam is right behind them at this point. I mean, these guys are inventive. They invented algebra. I couldn't do that. I could barely even pass algebra. They invent the idea of lenses, shaping glass so you can see things. So they made kind of the first telescopes, the first glasses to some extent. These guys are super rich too. We talked about Muhammad being a merchant, right? I mean, just like India, these guys just find themselves in the right spot. They might not have a lot of stuff to produce because of living in the desert, but man, can they cash in on moving stuff from one place to another? I mean, think about it. You are right here at a very important crossroads. Your trade can go to Europe, it can go to Africa, India, and of course the Silk Roads lead to China. You're right in the middle. And you've got these sea lanes all around. So the Islamic world is a pretty rich place, dealing in porcelain or silks or cotton or whatever it gets from around the world. So their job is like the link from east to west. You know what I'm saying? So anything that is invented, say, in India or China, has a shot of making its way to Europe or the Byzantines or Africa if the Islamic world takes it there. And so if you think about this role, they're hugely important. These guys gave you your numbers, which of course comes in handy with algebra. These guys didn't invent sugar, but they showed the Europeans how to make sugar. Now, perhaps you've heard these numbers. I know you've seen them, I'm assuming, anyway. We call them Arabic numerals, implying that the Arabs invented them. The Arabs did not invent these. The Indians invented these. In fact, here are the Indian numbers. Now, I get it. They don't all perfectly match up. But you can see, some similarities there, right? So what happens is the Indians are using these cool numbers. And the Arabs are like, hey, what you guys doing? That's pretty cool. That's useful. Oh. And the Arabs borrow it for themselves. They take these numbers and they use them. Then every time they come into contact with places like Europe or Africa, the Europeans are like, hey, what you doing there? Those are really useful. Now you might say to yourself, oh, come on, how impressive are numbers? Come on, what's the big deal here? Yeah, can I point out what the Europeans are still using? I mean, the Europeans at this point are still doing their math with Roman numerals, right? And they work great for clocks when you're only dealing with like 10 numbers. But I don't know, do this math problem, a simple division problem. How about that? It's impossible. There's no way to do it. So Roman numerals, although minorly useful, not the same. So why did Europe get these awesome, useful numbers with which Sir Isaac Newton could go about inventing calculus? They got it from the Islamic world. The Muslims didn't invent it, the Indians did, but the Muslims transferred it. Same thing with sugar. The Indians learned how to make the sugar cane here. They learned the process by which you cut down the stalks and you boil things, and delicious sugary diabetes comes out. The Muslims start planning it. The Europeans are like, hey, what are you doing? That looks delicious. And in a few hundred years, you're going to have a humongous slave trade because the Europeans are looking desperately for labor to make their own sugar. So, the Islamic world right in the middle, tying everything together, serving as the only link we have between East and West. Remember, in fact, it was the Islamic world that pulled Africa into the worldwide trade network, right? We talked about how, Africans converted to Islam, a lot of them anyway. They got sucked into the worldwide trade network through sea lanes and desert trading. And finally, Europe. Now, what's weird about this course is that, the course begins a few hundred years before Europe starts to get its head out of its butthole. And it ends with Europe kind of being dominant. It creates kind of a misconception, though. It creates a misperception that Europe has always been awesome. They had a great run with the Roman Empire, but they have not been doing well for about 1,000 years coming into this. Europe in 1200, pathetic. Science? Ha! Science? They're very weak in science. We're talking prior to the scientific method, prior to math really existing in this neck of the woods. Their technology is pathetic. Their claim to fame, the freaking iron plow. Hey, don't get me wrong, useful when you're trying to break up heavy clay soil, but that's not exactly an impressive piece of technology here. In fact, almost all Europeans lived in the countryside, knee deep in mud, farming away. Nothing wrong with farming. My grandfather was a farmer. In fact, he planted a seed and I popped up. But anyway, you've got cities of over 1 million people in China. You've got cities all throughout the Islamic world. You have very few cities in Europe at this point. They're very rural. I'm assuming you know what rural means. I hate the word rural, by the way. You can't say it without sounding like an angry dog or a drunk man. Rural, rural, or rural. Either way, it just means living in the countryside, not in cities. Europe doesn't exist as a political entity. There's not like the country of Europe. They're all over the place. They're broken up into a gazillion little tiny pieces. And so that's how I'm going to pathetically represent that on a map. So Europe is the least impressive society probably on the list. They're not centralized. They're poor. They're technologically backward. They are the laughingstock. Oh, the laughingstock of the world in 1200. Now, they're getting a little bit of a whiff, a little bit of a taste of what's out there, thanks to the Islamic world. Take a look at this. So trade coming in from, China, India, goes along these Silk Roads, makes its way maybe through the Byzantines or more likely through the Mediterranean to Italy. A lot of Italian merchants were cruising around. And it's these guys that are like, hey, what's that delicious white powder? Cocaine? Just kidding. Sugar? Oh, I got to make some of this. This is how Europe discovers the Arabic numerals we talked about. They're learning about all kinds of interesting technologies. They're like, what is that? It goes boom. Gunpowder, of course. So the Europeans are getting a little bit of this worldwide trade network slowly trickling in, just a tiny little bit. It's enough to give them a taste and to know that they want more. And that's going to become important in this course. Well, anyway, that's all about to change because in the early 1200s, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, pure, absolute disaster occurs. The Mongols spring up out of nothing, and then, like an explosion, torch the old world, the world we just described. They torched China, they torched the Islamic world, they torched Russia, which we haven't even touched upon. So the Mongols are important here because they're going to destroy the world we just set up. So that way, a whole new world can be born, a world where the Europeans have a much better time at going through history as an impressive power. But more on the Mongols tomorrow. That's all we got for today. See ya.